The small bakery sat on a quiet corner of a bustling neighborhood, its warm glow offering a welcoming refuge from the cold outside. The air around the bakery was always thick with the delicious aroma of freshly baked bread and pastries, a comforting reminder of simpler times. The old brick building had stood the test of time, with ivy creeping up the walls and a small sign that read Clara's Bakery hanging above the door. Inside, the soft clinking of pans and the hum of the oven were the only sounds as Clara worked tirelessly behind the counter. Clara had inherited the bakery from her parents, who had built it with love and dedication. She had always dreamed of keeping it alive, of carrying on the legacy her family had worked so hard to create. But the world had changed, and so had the neighborhood. New modern cafes and bakeries had opened nearby, luring away her customers with flashy designs and trendy offerings. Clara poured her heart into each loaf of bread and every pastry, but despite her best efforts, the business was slipping further into debt. Her passion for baking couldn't make up for the decline in sales. Late nights became routine, but no matter how much she worked, the bakery's future seemed uncertain. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Johnny Depp happened to walk down the street, enjoying the quiet escape from the chaos of the world around him. He was in town for a few days seeking some peace and a little anonymity. As he strolled along the sidewalk, the warm, inviting smell of freshly baked bread and sweet pastries reached his nose. It was a smell he couldn't ignore, and it immediately drew him toward a small, charming bakery tucked between two other shops. The wooden sign above the door, weathered but charming, read Clara's Bakery. The glass window displayed an assortment of perfectly baked treats, croissants, cinnamon rolls, and golden loaves of bread that seemed to beckon him inside. Johnny couldn't resist. He pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming softly as he stepped into the cozy, dimly lit shop. Inside, Clara stood behind the counter, her hands dusted with flour as she arranged some pastries. She didn't notice him immediately, so focused was she on her work, her brow furrowed in concentration as she carefully placed the goods on display. When Johnny stepped up to the counter, Clara looked up. For a split second she froze, eyes wide as she realized who had walked in. But Clara quickly regained her composure, offering a warm smile, masking her surprise. She had no time for distractions, too much depended on her keeping the bakery running. Still, a flicker of recognition crossed her face, though she pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. Johnny Depp, it seemed, was just another customer, and she didn't intend to make a fuss. As Johnny browsed through the bakery taking in the warm, inviting atmosphere, Clara felt the weight of her exhaustion pressing down on her. She continued to work behind the counter, but there was something about the moment that made her feel the need to open up, just a little. Johnny had noticed the care with which Clara arranged each item, the delicate way she handled each pastry as if they were her children. He smiled, intrigued by the thoughtfulness that radiated from her every movement. "You know," Clara said, her voice soft but steady, "this bakery has been in my family for generations. My grandparents started it, and my parents kept it going. I always dreamed of running it myself. But things are different now. The neighborhood has changed, there are bigger, flashier places opening up, and the competition is tough. I don't know if people still appreciate the kind of baking we do." She paused, wiping her hands on her apron, then turned to Johnny with a small, weary smile. "I pour my heart into every loaf of bread, every pastry. I've always believed that when you love what you do, it shows in your work, but, well, it doesn't seem to be enough these days." Johnny nodded, his eyes understanding. He'd heard similar stories before, people trying so hard, giving everything they had, but sometimes the world didn't seem to care. Clara's gaze drifted to the back of the bakery where her daughter Mia, a young girl of 14, was busy sweeping the floor. "My daughter Mia, she helps me after school, even though she should be out playing with her friends. She doesn't complain, but I can see the tiredness in her eyes. I hate that I can't give her more, she deserves a better life. I promised her when she was little that I'd make sure she'd never have to worry, but here we are." Clara's voice faltered, a brief moment of vulnerability breaking through her steady exterior. The weight of the years of struggle, of sleepless nights and endless bills, seemed to be too much. But she quickly masked it, returning to her work, as though nothing had been said. She couldn't afford to show weakness, especially now. Johnny listened closely, his eyes softening as Clara spoke. There was something in her voice, a quiet, unspoken desperation that struck a chord deep within him. He had been through his own share of challenges, both in his personal life and in his career. The world was often unforgiving, and success wasn't always the reward for hard work. He could feel the weight of Clara's struggle, the emotional toll it had taken on her over the years. "You know," Johnny began, his voice calm and steady, "I've been where you are." He leaned forward slightly, as if the words had been waiting to come out for some time. "I've had my fair share of ups and downs. People think that once you make it, you've made it. But that's not always the case. You can work as hard as you possibly can, give everything you've got, and sometimes, it still doesn't turn out the way you hope." Clara looked up, surprised by his words. She hadn't expected him to understand, let alone speak so openly about his own struggles. Johnny continued, his eyes distant for a moment as he recalled his own journey. "Success doesn't guarantee happiness," he said, almost to himself. "And failure doesn't mean you're not trying hard enough. Sometimes it's just about holding on, even when everything feels like it's slipping away." Clara nodded, appreciating his honesty. There was something about his presence that made her feel seen, understood in a way she hadn't in a long time. It was a brief but meaningful connection, a shared understanding that transcended the walls of her small bakery. Johnny looked around at the pastries, deciding on something simple. "I'll take one of those croissants," he said, pointing to a basket near the counter. He didn't need anything extravagant, he wasn't here for attention or recognition. He just wanted to support. As Clara wrapped the croissant, Johnny reached into his pocket and pulled out a generous tip, sliding it across the counter with a soft smile. "Keep doing what you're doing," he said warmly. "You're good at it, I can tell." Clara's eyes widened, her breath catching for a moment. She hadn't expected such a gesture, especially not from someone like him. But his kindness felt genuine, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. The next day, as Clara was finishing up another round of pastries, the familiar chime of the bakery door rang. She didn't look up at first, too focused on the dough she was kneading, but then she heard a familiar voice, Johnny's voice, saying, "I hope I'm not interrupting." Clara turned, surprised to see him standing in the doorway once again. But this time, he wasn't alone. A man stood beside him, a tall, well-dressed individual, who looked more at ease in a corporate environment than a cozy bakery. Johnny gave a friendly smile, and gestured toward the man. "This is my friend, Robert. He works in the food distribution business," Johnny explained. "I've been talking about your bakery to him, and he was curious to see it for himself." Clara felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. She hadn't expected Johnny to bring anyone along, let alone someone who could have some connection to the very industry she had been struggling to survive in. She wiped her hands on her apron, and offered a polite smile, though her heart was racing a little. "It's a pleasure to meet you," Clara said, trying to keep her composure. Robert extended his hand, shaking hers firmly. "The pleasure's mine. I've heard a lot of good things about this place. Johnny's been raving about your pastries. So, naturally I had to come see for myself." As Clara led them to the counter, she felt a bit of nervous energy, unsure of what to expect. Johnny had been kind, yes, but this was different. Robert seemed to be the type of person who could actually make things happen. The two of them took a seat at the corner of the bakery, and Clara quickly served them some coffee and pastries. Johnny had insisted she not worry about the details, but Clara couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. They chatted for a few minutes about her baked goods, and Robert seemed genuinely impressed with the quality of the pastries. But then the conversation shifted, and Robert leaned in slightly, his tone turning more businesslike. "You know, Clara," he began, "I've been in this industry for a long time, and I can tell when someone's got something special. Your pastries, they're the real deal. I've got connections with some local food distributors, and I think your bakery could be something big, if you'd be open to partnering with them. Get your products into some of the larger stores around here. It could open a lot of doors for you." Clara blinked, not sure she had heard him correctly. "Wait, you mean yes," Robert confirmed, smiling warmly. "We'd handle the distribution, you'd still bake everything yourself, but you wouldn't have to worry about the logistics of getting your products into stores. You'd reach a much larger audience." The words hung in the air, and Clara felt a surge of hope mixed with a deep sense of fear. She had always run the bakery on her own terms, never wanting to compromise the personal touch that had made her family's business so special. The idea of letting someone else help distribute her products, of giving up some control, felt like a betrayal to everything she had worked for. But Johnny's voice cut through her hesitation. "Clara, you've built something incredible here. This could be your chance to see it grow. You're not giving up anything, you're just taking the next step." Clara looked between Johnny and Robert, feeling the weight of the decision. Could she take this leap? Could she trust them enough to help her grow, without losing what made her bakery unique? After a long pause, Clara exhaled slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "I'll give it a shot." Robert smiled widely. "That's the spirit. I promise, Clara, this is going to be worth it." Johnny gave her a reassuring nod. "You've got this," he said softly. "Sometimes you have to trust the process." And just like that, Clara found herself on the edge of something life-changing, her heart pounding with the weight of the decision she had made. It was scary, uncertain, and full of unknowns, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the brink of something that could finally change her life. A week later, after careful consideration and many late-night conversations with Mia, Clara took the plunge. She signed the partnership agreement, her hand trembling slightly as she put pen to paper. It was a decision that felt like a huge leap into the unknown, but it was also a chance to secure a future for her bakery, and for Mia. She couldn't deny the excitement bubbling up inside her, as she sealed the deal. Within weeks, Clara's pastries were on the shelves of local grocery stores, each display stocked with her famous croissants, cinnamon rolls, and freshly baked loaves of bread. At first, it felt surreal to walk into a store and see her name on the products in the aisles. But soon, the word started to spread. Customers who had never stepped foot in her small bakery were now buying her goods, drawn in by the delicious homemade taste and the warmth of the brand. Clara's bakery was no longer a secret, it had become a staple in the community. Business boomed. The steady stream of customers that once trickled into her bakery had turned into a steady flow. With the increased orders from the larger stores, Clara had to adjust, but it was a good kind of challenge. She could feel the momentum building as the days went on, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of hope she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. The most significant change, however, was the way her relationship with Mia had transformed. Mia had always helped in the bakery, but now, as the business grew, her role expanded. Mia, with her sharp mind and organizational skills, took on more responsibilities, managing the store's orders, scheduling deliveries, and handling the growing number of customers who stopped by. Clara was amazed at how mature Mia had become. It was clear to Clara that Mia had inherited the same passion for the bakery that she had, but now she had a chance to shape the future of the business in her own way. Clara felt proud watching her daughter step into a leadership role, and it gave her a sense of relief. Mia was capable, and Clara no longer had to carry the burden alone. The increase in sales also allowed Clara to hire additional help, something she had never been able to afford before. Now she had a small team of bakers and staff, who shared the workload, and Clara found herself with more time to spend with Mia, her family, and even herself. The long, grueling hours she had once spent alone in the kitchen were now a thing of the past. For the first time in years, she felt like she was reclaiming parts of her life that had been lost in the struggle to keep the bakery afloat. As the months passed, Clara looked around her bakery, now filled with laughter, energy, and bustling customers. It was thriving, and so was she. Her dream of keeping the family business alive had not only survived, it was flourishing. And in the quiet moments, when the ovens were off, and the last customer had left for the night, Clara couldn't help but think of Johnny Depp, and how one unexpected encounter had changed everything. She would forever be grateful for that moment, the one that sparked a chain of events that brought her bakery back to life, and gave her a future she could look forward to. Several months had passed since the bakery's transformation, and Clara was in the midst of preparing fresh pastries, when she heard the familiar sound of the door chime. She didn't immediately look up, thinking it was just another customer, but then she heard a voice she hadn't expected to hear again. "Clara, I hope I'm not interrupting." She froze, her heart skipping a beat. She looked up, and there, standing at the door with a warm smile, was Johnny Depp. It felt surreal. It had been months since he first walked into her bakery, and now here he was, back again. She could hardly believe it. "Johnny," Clara exclaimed, unable to hide the surprise in her voice. "How did you? What a surprise." Johnny grinned, his eyes twinkling. "I wanted to see how things were going. I've been thinking about you in the bakery, and I figured it was time for a visit." Clara was overwhelmed with emotion as she led him to a table. "I can't believe you came back," she said softly, her voice thick with gratitude. "I've been so busy, but I've been meaning to thank you properly for everything. You changed my life." As they sat down for coffee, Clara told Johnny how the bakery had grown. She explained how Mia had taken on a bigger role, how business was booming, and how her dream of keeping the family legacy alive was finally becoming a reality. Johnny listened intently, nodding with a smile. "I'm glad to hear that, Clara. Honestly, I didn't expect my small gesture to have such a big impact. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can make the biggest difference. I think you had it in you all along, you just needed someone to believe in you." Clara's eyes welled with tears, but she smiled, touched by his humility. "Thank you, you'll never know how much that meant." As Clara watched her daughter Mia prepare for college, her heart swelled with pride. The bakery was thriving, and the financial worries that once consumed their lives now seemed like distant memories. Mia had grown into a strong, independent young woman, and Clara couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come together. The struggles of the past, the late nights, the uncertainty, none of it seemed to matter anymore. Clara had worked tirelessly to build a life for her and Mia, and now, thanks to the success of the bakery, she could finally see the fruits of that labor. Mia's dreams of going to college were within reach, and Clara could give her the opportunities she had once only dreamed of. As Clara reflected on the journey, she couldn't help but think of Johnny. His unexpected kindness had sparked a change that went beyond business, it had reshaped their lives. Without him, the bakery might not have survived, and Mia's future might have been uncertain. Johnny had shown Clara that sometimes, a small act of kindness could ripple through a person's life, changing everything. Clara knew she would never forget the day Johnny Depp walked into her bakery. That simple gesture of support had given her the courage to take a chance, to trust in the possibility of something better. And now, as she looked around her thriving bakery and saw the bright future awaiting Mia, Clara knew that hope could come from the most unexpected places. It had all started with a croissant, and a kind word from a stranger, and it had changed everything. And that's how a simple act of kindness can change a life forever. Clara's story is a reminder that no matter how tough things get, there's always hope, and sometimes, it comes from the most unexpected places. Johnny Depp's visit to her bakery didn't just change her business, it helped her build a brighter future for herself and her daughter Mia. It's proof that when we take a moment to support others, we can make an impact that lasts a lifetime. So, what does this story teach us? That kindness is powerful, that even the smallest gesture can spark a transformation. We all have the ability to make a difference, just like Johnny did for Clara. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with your friends, and make sure to subscribe for more heartwarming stories that remind us of the power of kindness and second chances. Thanks for watching, and remember, your actions, no matter how small, can change someone's world. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. What's the kindest thing someone has ever done for you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, we'd love to hear your stories.